one of the most pivotal periods of my life. It showed me how out of balance I was, and it showed me how unready I was. And the biggest challenge during that transition was that I was lost. I didn't have a plan. I had no direction. I realized that was finding my identity in what I was doing as an entrepreneur. The biggest transformational moment in my life was just realizing that I had become unbalanced and I was really lost, and I didn't know who I was or what I wanted to do. It was through that wake-up call that it really forced me to go down a path. And
Welcome to A Founder's Life. I'm your host, Leo Gestetner. On this show, we dive into the real stories behind the highs and lows of entrepreneurship and how we pursue a more balanced and meaningful life along the way. This podcast is sponsored by Thanks, helping founders like us scale with reliable remote talent. Email founders@thanks.com, that's THANKZ.com, with the subject line, A Founder's Life, and you'll receive preferred pricing. Now, I'm excited today to be joined by DJ Heffline. DJ, great to have you here. Would you mind kicking things off by introducing yourself to our audience, please?
Sure, Leo. Thanks for having me today. A pleasure to be with you. Leo, in simplistic terms, I'm a 40-year career serial entrepreneur that has, for my career, helped people and businesses transform and grow. That's what I do, and it's also who I am. And in the course of the 40 years, I also became a author as well as an executive.
Lovely. Do you want to talk a little bit about what brought you to where you are today, so some of your career path, and then also a little more about what your current business does?
Sure, love to. During the 40 years of career, I really separate my career into three major pieces. I was a serial entrepreneur for about 14 years, had some great experiences, did 6 projects in those 14 years and had some great successes, and I had some tragic failures too. And during the 6th project in that 14-year period, things were going really good until they weren't. And I found myself one day standing on the outside looking into a business that I and a small group of people had birthed, had created, blood, sweat, and tears to grow it. I was lost and I didn't have a plan. And that began my journey to try to understand processes and systems and how to recreate and rebound from a setback and from a disruption in not only your career, but your life and your business. Became a entrepreneur and spent the next third of my career in corporate America doing startup and turnarounds within big companies, using the same principles, the same entrepreneurial juices, had some great successes. And then the last third of my career, I ramped back up into private companies and landed where I am today in an executive position within a large U.S. manufacturer of filters for the commercial industrial businesses.
And you've got a book, I think, about to launch. Why don't you talk to us a little bit about that?
Yeah. So along the way, I mentioned during that first disruption, I was lost and didn't have a path. And what I found later as I learned more beyond that is many people don't see disruptions that are coming, not in their life, not in their career, not in their business. So what I did during that transition is I marked down very carefully the process, the steps I took to recreate myself, my life, my career, my business. And along the way, I also added some colorful stories to it and came up with some powerful tools to frameworks that guided me during that process. And I codified that in the form of the book that I'm getting ready to launch here in a couple of weeks called Shifting Gears in the Crossroads. And the book is about how to handle disruption and transformation in those 3 areas: life, career, business. Principles I talk about fit all 3. And the ones that I learned during that transition, I actually applied several other times later in my career, in my life, and further refined them into what you'll now see when you get a chance to read the book, and those that may be watching and listening get a chance to read the book.
Excellent. And I believe the book will be in Amazon by the time this comes out.
Yes, sir.
And talk to us a little bit about how family looks for you.
So family is critically important, and some of what I write about in the book is that across that career and all those experiences, there was a lot of shifting of gears inside the family. In the book, I talk about the 4 foundational elements of life: faith, family, fitness, and finances. And part of the recreation of myself back then, and what I've done continuously throughout my career, was to make sure that I established a vision, that's what I wanted to be, and a mission, what I wanted to do, and then I tied it quickly to some of those foundational blocks. Family is key. Across the career, I've been able to really invest in the family. It wasn't that way earlier on, not in those entrepreneurial years. I ended up sadly, being so focused on the dream and chasing wealth and wealth creation, do everything entrepreneurs do. And there's nothing wrong with that. But I did it at the expense of the four foundational areas, including family. Now, the family weren't estranged, and we were like many other families, and we would take the hard knocks and roll along. But I learned during that time, especially after sacrifices, that those relationships are critical. And instead of prioritizing the dreams, the visions, the aspirations, you have to invest and prioritize on family first. And I've done that ever since. I have a wife of 30 plus years. I have a daughter who's married and on her own has her own kids, a son who's recently graduated college. And I've poured into them the same principles that I learned, as I describe in the book, regarding that transition period, that transformation period. And family is very key and core to what I do today now.
That's great to hear. And talk a little bit about health. So how does health look for you? Again, whether that be mental health, physical health, nutrition, whatever form that takes.
That's a great question, Leo. And honestly, I'd like to be able to tell you that I am a specimen, a fit specimen. I could tell by looking at you that you are, that you've mastered that principle of health and fitness much more than I have. I'm still aspiring. I'm on the journey. But, it's one of those four foundational blocks that are critically important. And for me, I've come a long way in terms of getting balance in that area of my life. I refer back to many instances over that 40 plus year career as I was getting better at balancing the four elements. Fitness was one of the areas where I had tremendous weakness starting out. I was an athlete in high school and always enjoyed physical fitness, and I didn't have weight problems or anything. I was actually a skinny kid in high school, but when I started down the entrepreneurial path and things started to take back seat, including health, the weight gain came and the out of breathness and, what used to be muscle tone maybe wasn't so toned anymore. And part of that wake up period when I went through the powerful transformation I did was not only did I have to get some of my family aspects back in place, I had to get fitness back in place. And that's what I did. I renewed my commitment. And even today, I keep some disciplines. I walk and or ride a bike 3-4 times a week and try to get the heart rate up. I'm not going to compete in a marathon. I won't be in any kind of a cross-country bike race, but it's enough to keep me fit and to keep, my breathing good, the heart rate up and the blood pressure down. But then I also mix it with good, wise choices eating, and which for me, I know probably not like anybody else who may be watching this. For me, it was a real struggle because to me, eating was a form of entertainment, and it was a great way to cope, especially during the high pressure years. And part of what contributed to probably a less than optimal health situation in my life, but I've been able to work and get that back under control and at least get it reasonably balanced where I can feel at least good at the end of the day that I've eaten the right things and I've gotten some exercise and I can rest well at night. I mean,
Nice.
you have a fitness routine, right, Leo? So I'm sure I'm not saying anything you don't already know and haven't even demonstrated and are demonstrating in your own life.
Yeah, but the knowledge and the passion definitely came later. I mean, when I was 30, I was 95 pounds heavier than I am now. So 50% larger basically than I am now. Definitely was not fit, not eating particularly well. Yes, now I run marathons, I do triathlons, but it does take work. I mean, I'm often jealous of the people who, when they're stressed, they can't eat. My default, if I'm stressed, is eating crap. I mean, it is. I mean, it's eating the stuff I shouldn't be eating. Sugar, basically, in one form or another. So, it takes a really conscious effort not to, because, we all have stresses. There's plenty of stresses I have in my life. I just, it's learning how to manage it. And actually, I took a really conscious decision almost exactly 2 years ago now. I knew I was going through a particularly stressful period. I knew the next few months in particular were going to be really, really stressful. And I knew that my default would have been to be unhealthy. So I actually took a really conscious decision to go completely the opposite direction and to actually be one of the healthiest I've ever been in terms of eating. Because to put a focus into that took a focus away from falling into the trap otherwise. So, I think it really does take conscious decisions. And, I always say nothing should be 100%. I feel like having an ice cream, I feel like having a piece of cake. That's fine, as long as that's not the norm. It's all good. There's nothing wrong with having something that you shouldn't have, as long as that's not what you're eating every day. Like, I know that carbs at night, for me, don't agree with me. Well, that's fine. So every once in a while I might have some carbs at night. But generally, I don't have much of that because I know that with my body just disagrees with me. It turns it into fat. So, it's what are you doing 80% of the time? What are most of your meals? And fitness is obviously a big thing for me as well. Yes, I run 4 times a week and I weightlift 3 times a week. Might slightly overdo it a little, but,
Well, there's two things that I learned about myself as I went on this journey and considered the fitness aspects. Number one, I grew up in a household where mom lived at home and she cooked every day. And she put a full course meal on the table. And I was always told to eat everything that's on my plate. I always respected that. Part of what was on my plate was vegetables. The goal, the enticement was, if I eat all my vegetables, I get dessert. And that became a goal for me. And I'm pretty goal-driven, as most type A entrepreneurs are. And you know what I was doing? Man, I was knocking those vegetables out every night because I got to the apple pie or the molasses cookies or chocolate cake because that was the goal. I wanted the prize. I didn't realize it, but even in my adult life, even today, I think about finishing up the meal. And the first thing I think about is, okay, where's the prize? I've learned to deal with that a little bit more and recognize it and not be so susceptible to it. But the other thing, and this is a sad story, but, I've spent about the last 3 months helping my brother through the final stages of cancer. It was a tremendous disruption. It's what brothers do for each other. I'm proud to have done it. And it was a great experience and a bonding opportunity for the both of us. But it was such a disruption in my life. Everything changed. And I stopped eating, not in a healthy way, but my eating habits changed. I actually needed to exercise every day to deal with all the stress. And in about the last 3 months, just by virtue of the traumatic event that we were both experiencing, it made me change my lifestyle. So like you've mentioned earlier, sometimes something extraneous comes in and helps you change. And I've dropped even the last 3 months about 20, since I've gotten back, and I'm still handling the transition back. I'm trying to keep some of the habits that I've made in the last 3 months and turn that setback, that disruption, into something positive, which is something I've tried to do my entire career. And it's really what I talk about in Shifting Gears in the Crossroads. It's if you were to ask me, what is this book really about? It's a book about transformation, not transition, not change, although it could be both of those things. It's about transformation. And the way I see it differently, whether you're talking about fitness or family, faith, your finances, it's about repositioning yourself, about turning that event into a stimulus that says, okay, this could be bad for me and I could accept failure and give up, or I could address the failure, understand and learn from it, and move forward. So the book is about transforming, how to reposition yourself, whether it's forming different dietary habits or financial habits or spending more time with the family or taking care of the faith elements of life. It's about going from one position to another, transforming. That's the reposition, because in the book, I talk about 2 powerful frameworks. One is the 4 phases of transformation, of which repositioning is one, once you have that wake-up call. And then from repositioning, you go to rebuilding. That's where you start to put the pieces back together. Sometimes in reposition, you have to take a step back. Maybe means you get a business that's not yielding as much and you're not able to accumulate or appreciate the wealth you did, or a job that doesn't pay as much. But in reality, it's setting you up maybe at a lower level where you're actually going to get onto a plane, a trajectory, curve, a line is going to have a greater increase over a short period of time, lead you to a better end. So you reposition, then you begin to rebuild. And then as you rebuild, you work long enough and hard enough, you form relationships, you build alliances, you continue to reinvent yourself. You take a look at the future state, but you find yourself in a reemerge phase. That's when you kind of catch up to where you would have been if you hadn't changed, if you kept the curve and the disruption had a curve, and eventually you end up in the realize phase. And that's where you realize, or you achieve, that end state, the ultimate goal, or that place where you knew you had the potential to be, or where you had the potential to go. So whether you're talking about family, there's a good future state of what good's like. And if you're there today, and anybody in the viewing audience is there today and maybe isn't satisfied, or you aren't where you need to be, that's okay. Use the disruption, use the dissatisfaction as a stimulus to get you into that 4 phase of transformation.
What do you like to do for fun?
I think ride bike. Love to ride bike. It's a great form of exercise, great release. I do walking, and I love to play tennis. Those are the three things that I really enjoy doing. For the last 10 years, I will tell you that all those kind of took a back seat because I spent a lot of time with my son, who's now graduated from college. He was an aspiring baseball player, and he played throughout Little League and high school, and went into an NAIA baseball program. And as you know, and many of those who may be watching this know, when you're going down those paths as a parent, it's a significant time investment. You try to develop the individual, you try to understand the mindset, you try to develop the skills, and everything else you do, you put aside and you invest. So I would say a year ago, what I do for fun is helping, my son develop his skill set in his baseball careers. But now that he's moving on, I'm able to go back and pick up some of the things that I enjoy that'll help me get my balance in the four foundational areas of life.
And so that leads quite nicely to the next question, which is, how would you describe a balanced life, looking at how you are now?
I think there's got to be, let me back up and say this. I measure balance largely by time. What I found out in the entrepreneurial years and as I was learning the early phases of how to shift gears in the crossroads, my time allocation was out of balance. I was spending a lot of time chasing the dream, doing the business, landing that big deal, knowing if I land that next big deal, everything's going to be okay and wealth will be created, and then all the other things are going to fall into place that never came, at least never came in the time frames.
So what has been a pivotal moment in your life?
Well, not to beat a dead horse, but I would tell you that the first instance I described in that transformation period was one of the most pivotal periods of my life, because it showed me how out of balance I was, and it showed me how unready I was. And the biggest challenge during that transition was that I was lost. I didn't have a plan. I had no direction. I realized that I was finding my identity in what I was doing as an entrepreneur. When the successes were great, they were celebrative, right? They were like, man, let's celebrate, let's high five. There's an energy rush. There's an adrenaline that goes with it when times weren't so good. Yeah, it was kind of lean and not real fun, but it was the thrill of the chase. And I found that, I was into the thrill of the chase and getting my identity there. So the biggest impact, the biggest transformational moment in my life was just realizing that I had become unbalanced and I was really lost and I didn't know who I was or what I wanted to do. It was through that wake up call that it really forced me to go down a path. And part of what I talk about in the book is how do you find out who you are? And then I talk about how to create a vision and a vision statement. It's what you want to be. And then I also talk about how to translate that into a mission. Mission's what you want to do. And many times people get it backwards. I did. Who I was an entrepreneur. And what I wanted to do was entrepreneurship, and backwards. It didn't create balance. It didn't create focus or trajectory. So I learned that lesson. And once I began walking through the step-by-step process and developed and used now some of the tools I talk about in the book, and including exit criteria at each phase, I really learned how to create that vision. And I am a different person today than I was back then, and I've transformed. And truthfully, I've not stopped, and I'm pretty sure that you would probably attest too that you never really stop growing. You just keep learning, and you try to keep improving, getting better, and that's what I try to do today. But creating the vision statement, knowing who I wanted to be, converting that to a mission of what I wanted to do. And that's part of what we're doing here is what I want to do. I like talking. I like mentoring. I like sharing the story in hopes that someone else will be able to raise their hand and say, hey, you know what? I didn't think about that. I can identify with that. If this guy can do it, I sure can do it. Let me find out more. And if nothing else happens but one person getting encouraged and making that transitional period, that's what I want to do. That's who I want to be. I want to be a mentor and a trainer and a developer, a transformer. And I want to do it by teaching and managing and writing and all the things that we do nowadays. But that was the biggest transformation. There were, I would say, 4 major transformations in my life. But by the time I went through the other 3, I knew how to handle it. And I was prepared. And they became setups for additional success and repositioning so that I could get down the path further.
Nice. That's a great transformation. And what's one piece of advice you would give to an aspiring entrepreneur?
Find balance. Know who you are before you go down the path, and make sure that what you're doing supports who you are and who you want to be. And then also find a way to get balance in your life. I really monitor how much time I spend in each block. An example is I'll spend between a half hour or 45 minutes a day introspection, spiritual awareness. I read scriptures, I pray. A lot of people exercise this in different ways, but that's the way that I try to do it. I spend probably 8 to 10 hours a work day, Monday through Friday, doing career related stuff. Probably more sometimes than I should. I'm still recovering, still trying to figure out how to get there without being so unbalanced. But I also have set times, disciplines, and routines. For example, family wise, Dina, my wife, and I, we have coffee every Saturday morning and every Sunday morning, no matter what happens. We start out the day, we pour some coffee, and we spend an hour, hour and a half, and we just catch up on life and what's happening and what happened in her week and what happened in my week, what happened in the kids' week, and what are the things we're experiencing. We're involved in ministry together. So we talk about, some of the things we experience together in ministry that we don't have time to talk about every day. Date nights. Growing up, I spent a lot of time with my daughter, and my wife and I did growing with her in school and activities and supporting that, my son in baseball and the things that he did. And so those were some fixed things that we scheduled, and we made sure we didn't miss them, rarely missed them. And if we did, there was a darn good reason that couldn't be avoided. And the same thing with the fitness area that I don't profess to be an expert in, but I know that I need to close my loop every day. I have the Apple and the Apple phone, and I've got a target of calories to burn every day. And whether it's biking or walking or playing tennis or doing something in between, I try to close the circle every day. And then I'm a weekend warrior. Saturday, Sundays, that's when I really go for the 15-mile bike ride, which to a lot of people is just a warm-up. To me, it's an out-of-body experience. But I spend more time on the weekends trying to catch up on maybe what I missed when I didn't close my circles. And I get those ugly messages from my iPhone saying, you didn't close your circle yesterday. I try to close my circles and then some on the weekend. So it's about managing time and making sure you schedule in blocks of time, whatever's appropriate, for you to consider complete balance and then get that happening. So that tying that back to, what have I learned, or what would I advise to an entrepreneur who's getting in, starting up a business, getting started a new one? Especially plan your time, get balance in the 4Fs, know who your vision is, what your vision is, and make sure that aligns with your mission, what you're doing. If you do that, you'll be happy and fulfilled and satisfied, or your money back.
Perfect. And how can people find you?
So www.darrylheffline.com is my website. I have a tab there for shifting gears where you can get updates on the book's readiness and availability. Like we said earlier, it's a couple of weeks and it'll be available on the major platforms. I also have some downloadable tools there that go along with the book, how to tell which phase you're in and when you're in the exit one phase and get to the next one. So the engineers and the nerdy people like me out there that like tools like that and monitor processes and step by step, it's there. For the non-technical folks or the non-nerdy folks, if you just want to read the story, well, the book's where to find it's there and you can enjoy the stories. But I do tell colorful stories and examples and things that engage the reader to go along with it. But you can find me at www.darrylheffline.com. Book tabs are there. And if you want to learn a little bit more about my background and who I am, what I do, you can find out more there as well. Oh, yeah. And of course, LinkedIn. I mean, everybody uses LinkedIn today. I'm easily searchable and findable. And that's the other way, I think, to connect with me.
Well, thank you for joining us today.
Leo, thanks for having me. I enjoyed our time together. I enjoyed our conversation. I hope we can continue to stay connected in the future.
Likewise. And thank you for listening to today's episode. If you enjoyed the conversation, don't forget, please subscribe to the channel, tell your friends, and leave a review.